Now, as we all know, this country has famously punched above its weight in just so many spheres, whether it's in sporting circles, the stage, entertainment or science. We repeatedly figure above nations which have much larger populations and are expected to do much better than little old Australia. And in the field of science, we've had another massive win. The Chief Scientist at the Australian Museum has accepted the job of Chief Scientist at the prestigious United States Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. Professor Rebecca Johnson is highly respected for her breakthrough work on koalas. Yes, our favourite marsupial. I caught up with Rebecca just before she headed off to the United States. Rebecca Johnson, thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome. It's great to be here.
The biggest and best gig in the world, they're describing your new job. That says it all. Wow.
It really, in fact, those are my words. I'm so excited. I really had to pinch myself when I was offered the role.
Describe this for us lay people. Why is it regarded as such an honorary position?
Well, the Smithsonian's are museums that are world-renowned by far. There are 19 institutions that comprise the Smithsonian museums, including a zoo. And the National Museum of Natural History is where I'm going, and it's the biggest natural history museum in the world, and it's the third largest of the Smithsonian's. To give you an idea of how big it is, they have 5 million visitors a year.
Whoa!
Quite extraordinary. Yeah.
5 million visitors. You believe, don't you, that museums can save the planet?
I really do believe that museums can save the planet, now more than ever, because there is a lot of interest about our biodiversity. There's a lot of interest about understanding cultures and being more inclusive. And museums are really the custodians of everything that's ever been collected on the planet. And going to the biggest and best one in the world is the most extraordinary opportunity.
Let's rewind the tape. Take me back to when you were at school in science class. Were you a scientific nerd at the desk, staying back after class, loving your science?
Well, I think I was very nerdy, and I grew up on the northern beaches, which is extra. It's a daily reminder of how nerdy you are, and so I really loved science, and it was one of the earliest jobs that I wanted to do was to become a scientist. But like all children, I had many other careers that I thought I might fancy, particularly being a ballerina.
Excellent.
So there was many years that I dedicated to being a want-to-be ballerina, which eventually didn't work out, which I think was great for ballet and it was good for me too.
Very self-deprecating. There's no way you can incorporate your ballet love into the Smithsonian?
Look, I'll give it a red-hot go. I know that just down the mall is the Museum of American History, and one of the most popular exhibits are the ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz. So I would definitely be popping down the road to see those.
I'm sure you will, maybe even before you start the job. Tell me a little bit about your love of koalas. What you have achieved when it comes to koalas is quite extraordinary. Explain that to my viewers.
Oh, thank you. Look, I was one of the leaders of the Koala Genome Project, which is the first, really the first big mammal genome to be sequenced here in Australia completely, and led by Australian researchers. And you're right, I love koalas. I have a very deep interest in them. Because it was a conservation question, we were getting a lot at the Australian Museum. We were constantly being asked for our advice. Back to my point that museums can save the world, we have a lot of the knowledge that is going to help save the world. And we were being asked about the impact of land clearing and the impact of roads on koala populations just in little pockets of New South Wales. And so I thought, way back in 2012, wouldn't it be great to sequence the genome of the koala, because then we could answer almost anything about koalas. We would have the genome, we would be able to use that information to understand diversity of populations, we would be able to help answer these questions about extinction, about whether or not there's connectivity connectivity between different populations, and also to understand just the really interesting things about koalas, like how on earth do they eat the diet that they eat?
Yeah.
Because, of course, eucalyptus, if we ate the amount of eucalyptus that they do, we would die, because we do not have the ability to detoxify the compounds in it, but koalas do. So the genome has opened up a world of understanding for koalas, but particularly conservation, which is really why I started it in the first place.
Sort out a myth for me. Are they continually drugged out?
It's almost the opposite. They have very small brains, one of the smallest brains of all mammals, but they're actually super detoxifiers, because they have such a heavy load of toxins in their diet. They have all of these extra genes that help them metabolize these toxins that they're ingesting. So it's almost the opposite, that they can metabolize things very quickly. Like, for example, a really great outcome is that we learned that probably these channels act on a lot of the pain reliever drugs that they're given, and so they can they can actually process these drugs really fast, and maybe they don't work so well, and so choices are made to choose different pain relievers that use different pathways, so that they're not super detoxing everything.
That's so good. We've just decided tonight that it's official, koalas are not dopey. I love to hear that. That's really good. Very early on in your career, you chose a really cool mammal, didn't you?
A really cool mammal very early on in my career.
Well, koalas are just the coolest in the world. Why did you choose the koala?
If I'm actually able to wind back even further, I started my career in insects. So I went from the lesser cool to the more cool. But I chose them because they're something, I really wanted to make a difference. That when I first thought I wanted to be a scientist when I was very small, I thought if I became a scientist, I could cure cancer, or I could do something really cool. And of course, that is not what I do. But something I'm really passionate about is using the science that we have at museums to convert that knowledge into something that's very useful. And so I love koalas, and I love, they're just fascinating creatures. Yes, they sleep about 19 hours a day. They have these, as marsupials, they have these teeny tiny young, which are about the size of a jelly bean. They give birth after about 35 days, and then their baby does all of the developing in the pouch outside of the body. So they're quite fascinating, and there's a career of study there. But really, why I love them is because I think using genetics, we can really help to conserve a species that is so important to our country and the world. Everyone wants to see a koala.
Yeah, so many people were heartbroken when so many koalas were burnt in those fires up near Port Macquarie in New South Wales. You must have been inconsolable.
It was pretty hard to watch, that's for sure. And the koalas, of course, they are the icon of what's happening, but there are many other species that are suffering just as much, or perhaps even more, because they don't quite have the size of koalas. So the impact has been very substantial on animals as big as koalas. So the smaller mammals have suffered very badly as well.
You are representing probably all the scientists that ever had a degree of ambition in this country. You must be proud of that, because it's such an honorary position. Yeah,
I'm really proud. I have worked very, very hard, and alongside incredible people. I've had extraordinary colleagues and extraordinary collaborators, and so I have many people that have helped me achieve this. And I think it's a really great reflection on the quality of education that we have here in Australia, and the support for science and the kind of things that we do here, and of course the importance of museums, because we really do make such a difference.
Yeah, my 4-year-olds have even got membership to the museum in Sydney, and they love their natural history and their animals and their insects. It is fascinating. What's your message to young people, maybe not 4-year-olds, but certainly teenagers at school who might be thinking of a pathway towards science?
My message to anyone, even 4-year-olds, I think it's never too young to realise that science is awesome and fun, and it shouldn't be a drudgery. My message would be that the pathways in science are almost endless, and the opportunities are endless. Don't just think of science as being somewhere that you end up working in a university. There are so many other places that you can go. You can go somewhere like a museum. You could go to somewhere like working for Quarantine or Border Force. they have a really important job in actually identifying things going in and out of the country to figure out whether or not they're pests and whether or not they're things that we need to be worried about. And those skills, they're actually the kind of thing that you learn in museums, and they're so important, because if something slips through, we risk something exploding in our agricultural industry, or something getting into our livestock. So the pathways for science are extremely broad, as long as you're prepared to take on some jobs that maybe aren't exactly what you thought it was going to be, or be flexible and enjoy the journey along the way. I think it's very tempting to think it would be great to start as the boss, but some of the most joyful times in my career have been when I was a much more junior researcher, getting to go out and go into the field or learn things at the lab bench. And of course now I am in the incredible position of actually working with all of those people that are doing that great science.
Yeah, congratulations once again, and thank you so much for your time. All the very best for this incredible job. Well done.
Thank you so much. You're so welcome.